One problem with the use of self-reports is that aggression is a socially undesirable behavior, and respondents are aware that they are being asked to report behavior that makes them appear in a negative light or is illegal. This renders self-report measures susceptible to response distortions in the direction of social desirability, resulting in an underreporting of aggressive behavior. Applying a polygraph, which is a kind of lie detector that infers from the magnitude of test persons' psychophysiological responses whether or not they respond truthfully. A recent study by Poltavsky et al., 2018, examined socially desirable response biases to items from prominent self-report measures. They included a 12-item short form of the aggression questionnaire by Buss and Perry, 1992, plus 6 additional items from the Buss-Durkee 1957 hostility inventory, assessing indirect aggression, and the reactive-proactive questionnaire by Rain et al. 2006. Skin conductance, breathing time, and blood pressure were selected as critical responses and correlated to the self-report answers of the questionnaire items. The magnitude of physiological responses correlated negatively with 2 self-report scores, anger and indirect aggression, which means that the lower the self-report, the stronger the physiological responses. This discrepancy may be seen as evidence for the underreporting of aggressive behavior. No significant correlations were found for the remaining aggression measures. The relevance of this approach to studying social desirability response bias is twofold. First, it provides empirical evidence of a mismatch between self-reports and physiological responses to items assessing anger and aggression, and second, it enables researchers to identify individual items and scales in self-report measures that are particularly affected by these discrepancies. This information may be valuable for designing questionnaire measures that are less susceptible to socially desirable responding. Anger and indirect aggression were the 2 items that may have been underreported. Conflict Tactics Scales, CTS, instrument for measuring intimate partner violence by collecting self-reports of perpetration and/or victimization. Box 1.2, example items from the short form of the Sexual Experiences Survey, Koss et al., 2007. Item 2 of the short form perpetration, SES, SFP. How many times in the past 12 months, between 0 and 3 plus, and how many times since age 14, between 0 and 3 plus? I had oral sex with someone or had someone perform oral sex on me without their consent by A. Telling lies, threatening to end the relationship, threatening to spread rumors about them, making promises about the future I knew were untrue, or continually verbally pressuring them after they said they didn't want to. Showing displeasure, criticizing their sexuality or attractiveness, getting angry but not using physical force after they said they didn't want to. Taking advantage when they were too drunk or out of it to stop what was happening. Threatening to physically harm them or someone close to them. Using force, for example, holding them down with my body weight, pinning their arms, or having a weapon. Item 2 of the short form victimization, SES, SFV. Someone had oral sex with me or made me have oral sex with them without my consent by A. Telling lies, threatening to end the relationship, threatening to spread rumors about me, making promises I knew were untrue, or continually verbally pressuring me after I said I didn't want to. Showing displeasure, criticizing my sexuality or attractiveness, getting angry but not using physical force after I said I didn't want to. Taking advantage of me when I was too drunk or out of it to stop what was happening. Threatening to physically harm me or someone close to me. Using force, for example, holding me down with their body weight, pinning my arms, or having a weapon. Despite the known limitations of self-reports, it is often inevitable to ask people to report on their aggressive behavior, as there are no other reliable sources one could consult instead. However, In some contexts, it is feasible to rely on information from third parties who can provide information about the aggressive behavior of research participants. Parent or teacher reports of aggressive behavior. In studies measuring aggression in childhood and adolescence, parents and teachers may be recruited as informants. They have first-hand knowledge of a target person's aggressive behavior and can provide behavioral ratings that can then be examined for their convergence with each other and with the person's self-reports. Parent ratings of aggression are particularly useful for studying aggression in young children. An example is provided by Tremblay et al. 1999, who asked parents to rate their children on a list of 11 items addressing physical aggression, such as bites, kicks, and takes away things from others. Similarly, teachers can provide ratings of a child's aggressive behavior. For example, the teacher form of the Preschool Social Behavior Scale, PSBST, developed by Crick et al. 1997, consists of 16 items on which preschool teachers are asked to rate the children in their class in terms of relational aggression, e.g., tells others not to play with or be a peer's friend, and overt aggression, e.g., hurts other children by pinching them. In a study with adolescents, self-reported use of violent media was related to teacher reports of the participants' aggressive behavior in school to examine the link between media violence use and aggression. Crahy and Mahler, 2011. Peer nominations. Whereas parents and teachers are typically asked to rate research participants on a number of items describing aggressive behavior, peers are asked to nominate, i.e., select from their group, individual children who fit certain behavioral descriptors. For example, students in a class may be asked to nominate classmates who attack others without reason, say nasty things to other children even if they had done nothing wrong, or take other children's possessions. The more nominations participants receive, the higher their aggression score. Peer nominations have also been used to measure indirect forms of aggression. For example, in the Direct-Indirect Aggression Scale, DIAS, by Bjorkvist et al. 1992, participants are asked to nominate a peer who says unpleasant things behind the person's back. Using this approach, Kako et al. 2009 demonstrated significant correlations of R equals 0.43 between peer-nominated aggression at age 8 years and peer-nominated aggression at age 19 years for both boys and girls in an American sample. In the same study, a correlation between peer-nominated aggression at age 8 years and peer-nominated aggression at age 14 years of R equals 0.38 for girls and R equals 0.35 for boys was found in a Finnish sample. These correlations are impressive given that different peers provided the ratings at the two measurements. Peer nominations. Method for measuring aggressive behavior by asking other people, e.g. classmates, to rate the aggressiveness of an individual. Measures of aggressive affect, anger, and hostility. In addition to eliciting reports of aggression at the behavioral level, researchers are often interested in studying the affective concomitants of aggressive behavior, most notably anger and hostility. Standardized scales have been developed to capture individual differences in the disposition to experience affective states that are relevant to aggressive behavior. As shown in Box 1.1, Buss and Perry's 1992 Aggression Questionnaire contains two such scales, measuring dispositional anger and hostility. Another pertinent measure of anger is the State Trait Anger Expression Inventory, STAXI, developed by Spielberger in 1996. The STAXI addresses 5 facets of anger and the way it is characteristically expressed. The State Anger Scale asks participants to describe how they feel at a particular moment in time, e.g., I feel angry, I feel irritated. The Trait Anger Scale addresses the habitual tendency to experience these affective states. The Anger In and Anger Out scales refer to individual differences in the tendency to direct anger towards others in the social environment as opposed to directing it towards the self, and the Anger Control Scale measures the extent to which people try to keep their anger under control. The Staxi is available in many languages and has been established as a reliable and valid measure of anger in a variety of domains. State Trait Anger Expression Inventory, Staxi, measure of individual differences in anger expression, state and trait scales. Measure of aggressive cognitions, the Implicit Association Test, IAT. Given the undesirable nature of aggression, self-reports of aggressive thoughts and feelings may be susceptible to the problem of systematic underreporting, similar to aggressive behavior. Therefore, measures of aggressive cognitions have been developed that cannot be easily distorted in the direction of social desirability. Several studies have adapted the Implicit Association Test, IAT, first developed as a measure of attitudes, for the measurement of aggressive cognitions and aggression-related self-construals. The IAT is designed to tap into aggressive cognitions in an unobtrusive way by examining the speed with which aggression-related stimuli are recognized. It is based on the assumption that the strength of the association between a target category, e.g., self versus other, and an attribute category, e.g., aggressive versus non-aggressive, can be inferred from the speed with which participants can recognize particular combinations of the target and the attribute category. Participants are presented with a list of words that refer to either the target category, e.g., I, me, versus them, you, or the attribute category, e.g., ambush, choke, versus help, comfort. For each word, they are asked to indicate as fast as they can whether it refers to the category in question, e.g., press the left key if it is a word related to me, and press the right key if it is a word related to other, or whether it refers to the attribute category in question, e.g., press the right key if it is an aggressive word, press the left key if it is a non-aggressive word. If participants respond faster to aggression-related words when they share the same key with the me words than when they share the same key with the other words, this is regarded as an indication that me and aggression are closely related in the person's self-concept. Scores on the aggression IAT are interpreted as a measure of stable dispositions towards aggression, and they have been used to predict aggressive behavior in specific situations. There is evidence that the aggression IAT may capture both relatively stable individual differences in aggressiveness and situation-specific variability in aggressive behavior. Richton et al. 2010 found that participants' implicit aggression scores on the IAT predicted their negative behavior towards a target person, but only after a preceding provocation by the same person. A study by Gallwitzer et al. 2007 showed that IAT scores may be useful as unobtrusive outcome measures for evaluating the efficacy of interventions designed to reduce aggression. Other studies have shown that the IAT can also detect changes in aggression-related self-concept as a result of situational influences. In research on exposure to media violence, it has been found that playing a violent video game for brief periods of time leads to shorter reaction times for aggressive words associated with the self than playing a non-violent game, 2004. Implicit Association Test, IAT, reaction time measure to assess the speed with which a person can activate aggressive cognitions. Projective techniques. Another approach for exploring the affective and cognitive correlates of aggressive behavior involves the use of projective techniques in which participants are presented with ambiguous stimulus material and asked to generate a verbal or written response. Their responses are then scored for aggressive content by trained raters. The best-known projective technique for the measurement of aggression is the Picture Frustration Test, PFT, by Rosenweg, 1945. It consists of a set of cartoon drawings, each depicting a situation that involves some mild to moderate form of everyday frustration. An example is shown in Figure 1.2. The person who caused the frustration e.g., the driver responsible for splattering the pedestrian makes a comment that is designed to attenuate or add to the initial frustration. The participant suggests a verbal response from the perspective of the frustrated person in the cartoon, and responses across all cartoons are coded for aggressive content. For example, responses are categorized as extraggression if they are directed at the social environment, or as intragression if they are directed towards the self, a distinction similar to the Staxi scales of anger in and anger out. A children's version of the PFT is also available, and an example situation is, a girl on a swing is telling another girl that she is planning to keep the swing all afternoon. Rosenweg et al., 1948. Figure 1.2, example from the Rosenweg picture frustration test, PFT. Okay, so there's a pedestrian and there's people in a car, and the people in the car are saying, "I'm very sorry we splashed your clothing just now, though we tried hard to avoid the puddle." And then you can fill in the speech bubble on top of the pedestrian of how he replies. Apart from the time-consuming task of coding free response statements into a manageable set of categories, the reliability of such codings, i.e., their consistency across independent raters and across repeated codings by the same rater, has been difficult to achieve. Moreover, responses to the PFT have been found to be affected by social desirability concerns. Projective techniques, measures of aggressive dispositions in which participants project their aggressive thoughts, feelings, and behavioral intentions onto ambiguous stimulus material. Another well-known projective test is the Rorschach ink blot test, which has been used to measure aggression since the 1940s. Participants' associations in response to the ink blots are coded in terms of aggressive content, e.g., an explosion, aggressive potential, a response that an aggressive act is about to occur, aggressive past, a response that an aggressive act has occurred or the object has been the target of aggression, and sadomasochism, a response in which devalued, aggressive, or morbid content is accompanied by pleasurable affect. Despite generally good inter-rater agreement and some evidence of criterion validity in past studies, Kistevo and Swan, 2013, found little evidence that scores on the Rorschach tests were correlated with lab-based or self-report measures of aggressive behavior. Taken together, these problems with the PFT and the Rorschach test may explain why projective techniques are not widely used in the social psychological analysis of aggression. Using official records. Rather than asking individuals to provide reports about their own behavior or rate the aggressive behavior of their children, pupils, or peers, researchers can derive information about aggressive behavior from publicly available databases. These data sources are not compiled for research purposes, and therefore researchers are limited to whatever information has been recorded. Typically, they do not yield information about individuals, but about aggressive behavior at the macro level of communities and societies. Such information may nevertheless be useful for answering research questions about the scale of different forms of aggressive behavior and the link between rates of aggression and other variables. Crime statistics. Official records of reported crime are compiled by most countries, and these figures can be used by aggression researchers who want to study criminal forms of aggression. For example, the Uniform Crime Reporting (UCR) program in the USA, which was started in 1929, presents detailed information about the rates of different forms of criminal violence, broken down by a range of demographic characteristics, such as perpetrator and victim, sex or age, and also by geographic location. For 2017, it tells us that 17,284 cases of murder were reported to the police, which corresponds to a rate of 5.3 cases per 100,000 inhabitants. This figure compares with 23,438 cases, or a rate of 9.4 per 100,000 inhabitants for the year 1990, which indicates that homicide rates have decreased in this period. So in 2017, it was 5.3 cases per 100,000, and in 1990 it was 9.4 cases per 100,000. So criminal violence has been almost cut in half. For Germany, the National Crime Statistic reports a rate of 2.9 cases of murder per 100,000 inhabitants in 2017. These records can be used, for example, to test hypotheses about gender differences in the likelihood of perpetration and victimization, and about differences in violent crime rates in different times and cultures. Crime statistics can also be used to examine changes in crime rate in covariation with legal measures to address research questions about aggression. For example, they can help to answer the question of whether murder rates go up when the death penalty is abolished, or whether the tightening of gun control legislation is followed by a decrease in the number of gun-related homicides. We shall come back to crime statistics when we discuss these questions in later chapters. A possibly less obvious candidate for the use of official records to study aggression is the analysis of meteorological data that provide information on average annual temperatures and comparisons between geographic regions. Meteorological records have been used as an important source for studying the link between temperature and aggression. Historical analyses revealed that riots were more frequent in hotter regions and during hotter periods of the year, and this observation was followed by systematic analyses relating temperature scores and violent crime rates within and across different regions to further explore the link. By relating crime statistics to weather records, Anderson and his colleagues found, for example, that the incidence rates of serious and deadly assault were higher in years with a higher average temperature, whereas robbery figures remained unaffected by temperature. Anderson et al., 1997. Finally, newspaper reports have been used as another form of archival records by aggression researchers. For example, Mullen, 1986, referred to this data source in his analysis of violent behavior by lynch mobs. Based on newspaper reports of 60 lynchings in the USA between 1899 and 1946, Mullen demonstrated that the larger the mob relative to the number of victims, the more savage the lynch mobs were in their atrocities. Mullen used these data to argue that the larger the mob, the more difficult it is for members to retain self-focused attention that is important for inhibiting violent behavior. We will return to this issue in our discussion of intergroup aggression in Chapter 10. Archival records are a useful addition to the toolbox of aggression researchers because they provide data at the aggregate level of societies based on large samples. At the same time, they have obvious limitations. For example, that researchers have to take the data as they are in the database. Moreover, the analyses facilitated by these data are mostly correlational and do not lend themselves to the testing of causal hypotheses. However, the advent of modern statistical methods for multi-level analysis opens up promising directions for analyzing the interplay between variables at the individual level and societal level variables contained in archival databases. Such multi-level designs have been used to examine the role of country-level variables, such as different indicators of gender equality at the national level, in explaining differences in the rate of violence against women. Heisen-Kozadam, 2015. Official records. Data collected for purposes other than research, providing information about aggressive and violent behavior, e.g., crime statistics, newspaper reports. Summary. This chapter was designed to lay the ground for understanding and critically evaluating the research findings to be discussed in the course of this volume. A definition of aggression was presented that focuses on three aspects, namely harmful consequences, intention and expectancy of inflicting harm, and desire by the target person to avoid the harmful treatment. Dimensions for classifying aggressive acts were discussed to provide a framework for the systematic description of different forms of aggressive behavior. A variety of methods are available for the social psychological analysis of aggression. Systematic observations of aggressive behavior in natural contexts works well if the behavior has a sufficiently high frequency of occurrence, for example, to record aggressive behavior between young children. Field experiments involve a manipulation of the naturally occurring situation, but random assignment of participants to the manipulated conditions is usually not feasible, undermining the ability of this design to identify causal effects. Ethical constraints prevent researchers from setting up situations in which participants are given the opportunity to harm another person. Therefore, experimental analogs have been developed that facilitate the study of behaviors intended to harm another person without causing any actual harm. Evidence was presented which shows that findings obtained in artificially created laboratory tasks correspond in many areas to findings obtained from studies conducted in the real world. When first-hand observation is not possible, a range of methods are available for collecting reports of aggressive behavior. These include self-reports, parent or teacher reports, peer nominations, and projective techniques. Archival records, such as crime statistics and even weather data, provide an additional data source that can be used to establish the rates of different violent offenses and to examine covariations of aggression and a range of other variables.